Good afternoon to you all. This is episode 2 of Aerospace Chronicles, the show where we come to you to speak about our thoughts, latest news on the aerospace sector, and just our thoughts on that and how we help aerospace companies deal with some of the issues that we're seeing and just chit chat to give you guys an update on what's new in the sector and what we've been up to. So, my name is Katrina Douglas, founder of The Launch Strategist, and I'm joined here by the wonderful Bumi Durowoju. So, Bumi, over to you for a little bit of an intro.
Hi, everybody. It is great to be back for a second time. And I will say, first of all, thank you for everybody who joined us for the first time. Even actually, I didn't tell you, Trina, even up to this weekend, I was all the way in Norfolk, and someone said how much they enjoyed listening to the
Wow.
so cool, right? The program that we put out last. So that's
Yeah.
great. And as we said, we've got some things to update you on.
Yeah.
Stick around because we are going to be talking about astronauts stuck in space
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
quickly at
Yeah.
the end. So
Yeah.
we're gonna unpack that a little bit in our
We
special
are.
guest.
We
So
are. We are absolutely. And I'm just making sure we're all live on LinkedIn. If you are joining us live, let us know where you're tuning in
yeah.
from, what line of business you are in. And yes, let's get into it. So, the topic for today is lightening the load for managing directors. Now, Bumi and I, over the last couple of years, have spent a lot of time speaking to aerospace managing directors, understanding what's going on in their businesses and the particular nuances that aerospace businesses face. And we know that as much as they are so passionate, so committed to their businesses, a lot of these MDs are actually engineers themselves. They've come up the ranks. They are incredibly passionate and committed to the sector and their businesses, but they are also overstretched. And there are a number of ways that we've seen them being stretched. And we just want to tackle that and, discuss among ourselves some possible solutions, dovetail into how we kind of help lighten the load. But let's talk about it because a lot of times the people at the helm almost suffer in silence. Like they are there to make sure the organizations run swiftly. They are there to keep the ship together and rowing in that direction. But sometimes what that means is that there's burdens and there's a load that isn't always visible, but we've been privy to it. So let's talk about that. Some of the things that we see, because although aerospace is a massive sector, a lot of these businesses are quite small, relatively small. So it might be 25 to 30 staff. So they're still kind of involved in the operational level. We've seen that they're still flying to a lot of sales meetings, heavily involved in business development, and sometimes bogged down in the operational aspects of it. So let's speak about this. And so, how can we begin to support these managing directors? We want to give some tips. If you are a managing director of an aerospace company and some of these things resonate, we want to give some tips and thoughts on how you can kind of overcome those things. So, and as you know, for me, interrupt, chime in, as you've been with me on the road as well. And so we're just going to talk together about these things. And so one of the things is engineering companies, aerospace companies are great in terms of engineering processes. Like they are meticulous. Safety is a thing, it's the priority. But sometimes when it comes to commercial and business processes, whether that be business development, whether that be operational management, whether that be internal things, there isn't that same level of rigor. And one of those things is because they're short of time. They literally do not have capacity. So, where does a managing director start? Because it's one thing to acknowledge these things, it's another thing to be able to address it. So he knows that he's traveling, or she is traveling all over the world and isn't in the office maybe as much as they want to. They know that their business processes aren't really what they should be. They know they're not focused as much on strategy. But where do you start? Where do you start? Where do you start?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to hand over to you, Bumi, because I think some of these, for your initial thoughts, because your background is business strategy, and yes, some of these things are specific to aerospace, but there's some general things. What would you say to that managing
Yeah.
director? What do we say? What would we say to that managing director?
Yeah, yeah, and I think Trina, you sort of touched upon it in terms of um, the aerospace nuance that we've been seeing,
Mm,
right? Which we will mention. We mentioned before. We will continue to mention it. Which is, and again, we're talking about some of these smaller companies
yeah,
who have been quite ingrained in a certain way of working.
yeah,
Some of the people have come up through the ranks and
yeah,
have been in position for a very long time
yeah,
and have been lucky enough to have some key contracts and key engagements, which has enabled them to just keep going for a long time as is. And and so I think that has what has maybe impacted some MDs in that
mm,
actually to keep going as is in this current state and where we are now is no longer
yeah,
achievable.
yeah,
But where do they find the confidence to do all
mm,
the things, right? The
yeah,
delegating,
yeah,
the outsourcing, the training up in
mm,
for them to be able to start handing off some of those responsibilities.
yeah,
So it's really weird because when I look at it, sometimes I think, wow, I'm talking to an incredibly established company,
yeah,
but I'm seeing almost startup
yes,
founder
yes, yeah,
issues here,
yeah,
which is, oh, what all of that is on you, you
yeah,
know, and you haven't set up a structure to
yeah,
hand some of this stuff off or not. And then
absolutely.
it's not until we get and we learn and we dig and we understand like why, yes, this has only been the one person, be it
Mm,
a family company or be it the one who had the engineering degree and what have you, who's feeding that into their environment.
mm,
So I think that's a really interesting thing that we've seen, like these established company with startup issues.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's a perception issue.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like some of these companies see themselves as grasshoppers when they compare themselves to a lot of these companies we're talking about, they're the tier twos and the tier threes
Correct.
in the supply chain. So the tier ones are the monsters that, everybody knows about, has all this visibility, the Leonardos, the Boeings, the Airbuses, the Rolls Royces. Those are the juggernauts. And so sometimes what we see is that these tier twos and tier threes almost see themselves as grasshoppers.
Mm,
And so
mm,
actually one of the first things is actually to say, you know what? A lot of these companies have such niche expertise. They've been around for
yeah.
20 to 30 years. It's stepping away and saying, actually, we're not just this company that serves these bigger companies and kind of has to jump to the beat of the
Mm,
industry in that way. We actually have 30 years of experience. Let's
mm,
step back for a second, for a minute. And sometimes that's what we try and do with companies, to actually say, we know you're busy, but give us half a day of your time for you to actually step back and look at the bigger picture and look at what's happening. Because
yes.
it's one, yes, seeing themselves sometimes smaller than they actually are and diminishing in their own minds their capability, even if they don't
Mm,
think they're doing that. But actually realizing you have an identity all by yourself. If you
yeah.
just stood away for a minute and looked at the expertise, looked at the revenue opportunities, looked at your skill set, look what you have, your business could be infinitely more profitable. And actually, if you stood back, you might actually find you have more time than you think. But because you're
Absolutely.
in the trenches day in and day out, because you are in many cases the founder of the business, because this original idea and this original technology was actually your brainchild, you're so in the trenches that actually, even though it is busy and you do have big projects,
Mm,
there is probably more scope than you realize just to step back. And if you take that half a day, 2 days out to just think about actually what's happening in the business, and let's kind of rethink a few things. A lot of the things that we're talking about can be solved a lot easier
Yes.
than people think. But it's
Yeah.
actually because this is the way we've done it. This is the way we're always going to do it. And that's something we try and do. We kind of we're kind of a pattern interrupt. And
Yes.
we're like, actually, have you actually stopped to realize this actually isn't working? Or you are running literally all over the world, jumping on a plane or here. Have you stopped to think, actually, maybe this is probably not the best use of your time? Or
For
how can we
you to do
do that?
exactly.
You know? And I
I
think, yeah, go ahead, Bumi.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. But I think you touch on it in that it often would take an independent party to
Yeah,
give that
yeah,
viewpoint.
yeah.
I think also, and it's sad really that some people get to that point, but out of duress, either
Yeah,
from business and economic pressures, uh, um, or pipeline workforce pressures, and I think that the message is get there before you have to get there.
absolutely.
Do the step back
Absolutely.
before you have to do that, and be open to embrace some things that were not in your purview, and that's life anyway,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I can only I only know what I know,
yeah,
and I think it's a case of being open to how and the change, and also just hear something with somebody who's got a different lens, but prioritize that time to do
yeah,
that before you're forced to have
yeah,
to do that.
yeah. Absolutely. And we see a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the aerospace sector. And I can't help but think this kind of
Mm,
culture has something to do with that, where smaller companies getting bought up and really having no choice to sell in some ways if they want to survive, because these commercial processes, because these business processes weren't in place, because maybe the thinking hadn't been done prior to it
yeah,
becoming a necessity.
yeah.
So this
And
is, yeah, yeah, go on.
sorry, I was
Yeah,
going to say, and ultimately, some companies, and we've had a look, they're leaving money on the table,
absolutely.
right? They're leaving a lot of money on the table, not being able to get to either existing companies, existing
Mm,
projects, and what have you, not being able to grow some great extensions of their businesses,
mm,
which could increase revenue exponentially, but not being able to get to it.
yeah,
And then you then think about then what happens if I'm not being able to grow at actually the pace that I should be able to grow from a financial perspective. What else am I not doing?
yeah,
Am I not being able to update my offices? Am I not being able to bring on more staff? Am I not being
mm,
able to get the right machinery? Ultimately, because we didn't stop, wait, take a look and see where we can actually start picking up some of that money, picking up the clients that we just haven't contacted for a while and such
yeah,
like.
yeah,
So from a straight economics perspective, it often doesn't work out. And
yeah,
because you've said these guys usually have like these big contracts, and everybody's eating,
yeah,
everybody's eating
yeah,
at home,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's just like actually you might be eating, but what is the addressable market that you're not really looking at?
Absolutely. And that taking that time for that forward thinking, yeah, and it's safeguarding the legacy, it's
Yes.
safeguarding the business, it's future planning so that you can be around 20, 30, 40 years from now, because a lot of them lead with, oh, we've been around for 20, 30, 40 years. But what we always say is what has helped kept you for the last 20, 30, 40 years is not going to keep you for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things is a capacity issue. I was even speaking to an MD today, and he said, one of their biggest concerns is around recruitment and having enough skilled people, engineers on the floor. And that is a massive issue because they know that there's business to be had. In fact, this particular MD said that he'd actually had to turn down business this year. Imagine that,
Yeah.
turn down business this year because you did not have the skills, you did not have the capacity to be able to meet that requirement. You know, can you imagine the cost? Because literally you're so in the trenches and you haven't been able to solve that conundrum. And those are the conundrums we help businesses solve. Like, let's step back, let's solve this problem, because, and we see this so often, business isn't a problem. There's so much business out there for them,
Yes.
but they either don't know how to secure it, they do not have the capacity to secure it, and they just don't know what to do about it. And so these are the problems that we're out here trying to help managing directors in aerospace manufacturing companies solve, because it's a massive conundrum. Yeah.
A couple of things on that, actually, because I did look at our topics and I was thinking, well, you know what, we could talk about this for any industry, right? And it applies to any and every industry. And every now and again, I'm just like, okay, where is the aerospace space nuance, right? Where is the particular piece that applies to this industry? And one of them is, there is business out there, right?
There is.
Which is different from some of industries that we're talking about, where, you know, you've got lots chasing a few, but there is business out there. There is funding out there. There are projects out there. There's just not enough of nearly anything to execute the way we are now. That is one of the nuance about this industry. I think it's why I love it, because I'm just like, okay, at least we're not going to have to worry about that. We just have to sort of worry about what we're happy doing, which is best life. So that is a key point. And another point, which is, I think there was another company that we spoke to about recruitment too. And there's one thing about expressing the problem, like, we can't recruit, there's not enough out there. But this particular company, I think, were very candid with us and just said, well, where are we inviting our new recruits to? What environment are we asking them to come into? What is the work culture? What are their work? Who are their work colleagues? I think it was one day we went there and these guys just saw us and walked past, and I was like, oh, they didn't even say hello, Katrina. You know, so I was just like, you know, bring in sort of a Gen Z who's just finished traveling, and it's just like all things big world coming into this industry, and you've come into a place where actually the probably great charismatic MD who has all the stories and really wants this to happen is not available, or is overtaxed, or it's just about got 5 minutes for this person, in a place where, as we said, may not have had the investment it should have had to be an attractive place of work and what have you. And we start seeing the consequences of it. So it's more than, oh, you know what, we just can't recruit. People choose now. And what are you doing to make sure they choose you?
Absolutely. And I think that is an amazing point to kind of hang on, because a lot of times it is as if it's something out there. And yes, we know there's a skills shortage, but it's more than that. There's enough talent out there to be attractive if you are positioned correctly to attract the talent. And you know where to look. So no, I love that point.
And then there is the strategy, which, you know, if people want us to talk about it, we will. But there is that strategy, even like you said, from the not enough people in the talent pool, but you know, the strategy of or who is not in the typically targeted pool. Who do we want to actually poach from another type of industry, another age group, another set of people who have the capacity to learn quickly? What programs have we got in place, right, to make a designer who's just been doing something else, design, come over and do some capacity building within the aerospace industry, and then become an absolutely stunning employee of that industry? We're talking about people switching. We're talking about really throwing out our net widely and ensuring that we've got the different channels that will then bring people through for them to eventually land in the companies of choice.
Absolutely. And so there are great opportunities, but also great threats to pursuing those opportunities. And we're seeing some of the things that MDs are grappling. And so what we're saying is there's nothing that cannot be solved, but actually it requires time and space to actually sit and strategize and commit to fixing these problems. Because if MDs in aerospace continue to sit in these issues and just continue because they've always gotten along so far, they've gotten along to date and it's been fine, the day will come where actually it's not fine.
It's
And
not fine.
so, yeah, it's absolutely not fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, yes, and that sticky,
Yes,
because
yes, yes,
this this is high
yes.
stakes. This is high stakes industry. We know every widget, every little hole that's drilled, every engine that's gone out there and what have you. We already know. I know I'm just telling everybody out there, suck eggs. We all know it's high stakes.
Yeah.
So to have an environment where it's stretched and tension and things possibly missed, whether we choose to admit it or not,
Mhm.
is not really the way forward. Now, when it's very, very obvious, it's obvious to all,
Yeah.
right? It's obvious to all. If
Yeah.
the leader is not around, if the leader is not together, if actually too much delegation or not enough delegation,
Yeah.
or too much delegation to the wrong people, no accountability, even if you're not accountable, if you've got the right eyes on and what have you. This is high stakes. It's high stakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, long story short, speak to us and let's solve these problems together, because we can see them, and we have the time and we have the capacity. And one of the things that we do in these organizations is build their capacity, and in most cases provide that capacity through teams on our side. So don't struggle in silence. If anything that we've said has resonated with you and you can kind of see that, yes, you are a little bit worried about the skill shortage, you do think that you're a little bit stretched traveling too much, you do acknowledge that actually you could spend more time on the kind of commercial business strategy side of things, you do acknowledge that there's revenue opportunities that you're not fully maximizing, then don't just sit with that, because you don't have the time. Give us a call, jump on a call with us, send us an email, and let's at least have an initial conversation. So yes, Bumi. Now let's go into the news side of things. Like, what is new? Like, what's happening? What's latest news? What is kind of like piquing your interest in the kind of aerospace?
There is so much piquing the interest, right? That's why we're here. We're here. And I'm sure it's this story. I think a lot of people know this story, but Trina, there's some things to unpack here, girl.
There
But we
are.
need to do this together and see. And as usual, a few caveats. We are not atting any companies. We
No,
know,
absolutely
we
not. We
know
love
this is
support.
these
Yeah.
these things happen. Okay. Um, I'm a storyteller, so there might be some versions of the story. I'll try and stick to the main fact. And the main thing is there's some things that I think we should be thinking about. And
Yeah.
actually, it does go back to some of the things that we're saying. So I haven't got much time. So the story about the two astronauts
Tell us.
currently stuck in space.
Can
Now
you
that
imagine?
sounded great,
Can
right?
you
That's a
imagine?
Netflix.
Like
That's a
stuck,
Netflix
stuck,
thing.
stuck.
As it happens,
Yeah.
and I'm sure people do know this story, but we're going to unpack little bits. Sunny
Mm.
Williams,
Yeah.
I think she's about 58, and Butch Wilmore,
Mm.
test pilots, astronauts, NASA astronauts, were sent up to space to hang out on the International Space Station, which, by the way, that's going to be a whole new program. Like, I
Yeah.
want to know the rooms in the International Space Station.
Right?
What are the kitchen appliances? Do we have a sauna? I need to know, because people will
What
be up going
facilities
up
do
in
we
this
have going
train.
on? How are we spending free time up there in space on the space station? Yeah. Yeah.
Whole work. But just so you know, and I'm just thinking of it like, oh, it's like a hangout in space for very clever
Literally.
people,
Yeah.
space
Yeah. Yeah.
astronaut types,
Yeah.
doing things in space, International Space Station. So Sunny and Butch jump onto a Boeing Starliner space capsule.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go to space. We're going to go hang out,
Yeah.
as you do. So, to be honest, it was a bit more than hang out. Space capsule, newly built by
Mm-hmm.
Boeing, needs to go on its maiden voyage. We need to
Yeah.
get it, see everything's all right, let it go up there. If we're good, this capsule will be used to like take stuff up there. By the
Yeah.
way, everybody, this story, this is real. So this is why I love
You
this
should love
area.
it. This
I'm
is real
I'm
life.
talking as if we're just going down the road. We're talking about space. I just
Yeah.
love it. That's what I love. That's the unpack thing, right? So they're just like, we're just testing this vehicle so that we can set baked beans and things up in the
Yeah.
future. No problem. Send it up. Best pilots, admittedly, Sunni, Butch, they are naval captains, they are helicopter, they are the best of the best. We're talking like hardcore. They go up, space capsule breaks down, Trina.
Stop
Trina,
it. Can you imagine?
can you
Wow.
can you imagine
Can
me
you
and you on one of
It's
our
not like a
road
bus,
trips?
like just going up the road. Like the capsule has blown. So how are we getting back to Earth? And
How
how
will we
soon
get
can we get there? Because
right?
yes,
Space capsule makes it. Space capsule isn't coming back. What happened to the space capsule, Trina? We have something like 28 thrusters. So I'm learning. I may not have all my figures right. 6 of these thrusters die. No thrusting. That's not what happened. Then there is a leak in the propulsion system, a
yes,
helium leak or something.
yeah.
That's all gone. Space got break down. So we're just like, okay. Now, this mission was supposed to be an 8-day mission. Nobody's coming back in 8 days, Trina, because the
No,
capsule's
are they
broken.
even coming back in 8 months for me? Because like where, like how are we getting home back
This
to Earth?
isn't right. So luckily, they land in space station, so they're all good, right? There's
Yeah,
people there, although they don't have enough clothes, which is really quite hilarious. They don't have enough clothes. Someone's got to take some clothes. They're in the space station. How are we getting back down? They then send the AA version over to the capsule. They're like, can someone have a look at this capsule, see what's going on? And they're just like, okay, we're going to need to tow this baby back to Earth. And everyone's like, can we, like when who's being picked up by the AA, can we come with you in the van, or do we need to get someone to come and pick us up? And they've decided 2 weeks ago, we can get the capsule back, but we can't get you guys back
can you imagine?
because we don't think it's safe. So Boeing's having a tough time. They've got to come and get the capsule back. Astronauts, every time you see a picture, they're like this. Which I think is funny, a mentality situation there.
Yeah,
They're like, it's all good.
yeah.
Space is a happy place. That's what their last quote was recently. They
Wow.
felt a little bit away when they saw said Starline get towed back to.
Yeah, I would too, because where's the vehicle for me to get back? Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
next point, and I've got to go, but I love this story. And this is where we are. Mr. the Muskmeister, Elon, driving past in his shades, in his Tesla. Hi, I hear there's a problem here. Do you need some help? Right? He's like,
Elon.
you gotta love Elon. And I think actually it was NASA just going, Elon, I think we need your help. And he's like, funny, as did you know, I'm sending my crew up there. My crew were just going to be up there in September. Funny enough.
Up there in space.
Casually. This is where we're doing. Casually. I'm going up there in September.
Yeah.
I'll just bring your guys back with me. Is that all right?
Wow. Wow.
That would be really lovely of you, Elon. SpaceX crew. Can you bring that? But we're talking about this now. Admittedly, all of these are scheduled way in advance.
Yeah.
Elon's crew are going up in September. They're coming back in February. And they just said, all right, don't worry. We'll leave 2 seats open for you and we'll bring you all back home.
Wait, hold on. This 8-day trip that started out when? In July?
June
is now turned into, what is that? They're now back in February.
Yeah, it's the 8 month. It's gone for 8 months. Yeah.
Wow.
But let's think about this. So the bits that we're going to unpack is, first of all, crew are fine, right? So I'm not, I'm
Amazing.
not making
Amazing.
light of people suffering like floating around in the movies, right, with no oxygen. That's not what we're doing here. In fact, I think Elon Musk's people went and took them extra clothes.
Okay, nice, nice, nice.
Very nice, and food. So we're not talking about that. So I'm not making light of that. But on one hand, you're like, oh, come on, I was going to go up for 8 days and I've got to stay for 8 months. But where we are in this industry to say, dudes, I'm stuck. Anybody else coming up? Oh, yeah, I'm on my
Yeah.
way.
Can you imagine? Oh, and then another company, a commercial company, not even a government company, saying, "Do you know what? We're up there in September." Like
Yeah.
this is the times that we're living in. And you said your propulsion went. When we go to Farnborough Air Show and places like that, you now understand why there's so many companies and so much focus on things like propulsion. Because 2 years ago, I didn't even know that was a thing. You know, but
And
yeah,
no,
it's
carry on, carry on.
no, it's absolutely wild that we're actually speaking about this. But you know what struck me, Bumi, when you said that, and we're going to come back to the actual scenario. But Sunny is 58. Sunny is out here living her very best space adventures at 58. Can we just put our hands together for Sunny?
Anita.
Okay, some of us are out here wondering if we can just maybe start a little business or do a little adventure, climb a little mountain. And Sunny's like, I'm 58 and I'm out here gonna go on this test capsule up to space. Like, that's a wow for me. I'm impressed, Sunny. Like,
Wow.
I'm impressed. I
And
am.
like I said, every
Yeah.
time you see Sunny's hair is somewhere, like, I mean, I'm gonna when I see Sunny, I'm gonna show her a little, I don't mind, but her hair is wild, and she's like this, and I was reading her thing,
Oh
and I
my
was just like,
God.
girlfriend flies helicopters, does
Yeah.
her thing.
58. Like, I'm here for all of it.
Here
Yeah.
for all of it, and like I said, I triple checked. I was like, is Sydney going to be all right up there?
Yeah.
And absolutely, they're busy. They do a lot of stuff on the International Space Station.
Mhm.
Lots of research and what have you. These are the brightest. The training that these chaps have up there is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not supposed to have been 8 months, so there ain't no Christmas or New Year, and I think they're even missing Valentine's Day back home, but and they will come back. But then let's go back to this kind of thing. Boeing has been having a hard time.
They have been for a while now.
Boeing's delivery of,
Doing.
yes, from the aviation perspective, a hard time.
Yeah.
And trying to obviously bring it back to what we've been talking about. If things are getting stretched to the point, right, where some things are being missed, like, I mean, these were not tiny things gone wrong.
Yeah.
These thrusters went, no blame. I know nothing about that, but I think I don't need to labor the point, right?
Yes.
If we were in these high stakes, as we said, industries, everything, including your style, your time, your moments, everything is just completely imperative.
Yeah.
And so there's that piece as well. And then there's the other piece. And just I know we've got to go, but the unintended consequences and the way we truly look at things. Everybody has said, oh, Boeing and NASA has now had to go and get one of their competitors to help out. Elon. By the way, guesses on Elon, the name of Elon Musk's.
Tell me.
Called the Crew Dragon.
Oh wow, yeah.
So he's got his Crew Dragon. So they're talking, or they mentioned him in terms of a competitor to Boeing. And now they're having to rely on one of their competitors to actually help bring bring their astronauts back safely. And if, to me, the bit that I want to unpack is that this notion of like competition at the moment in a place where there ain't a lot of people being able to go up and down there like this.
Yeah.
So should we not actually have a bit more of a collaboratory approach? And they may well do. Don't get me wrong. They may well do. But ultimately, there has to be a level of, wow, some mutual working together, which we are seeing here beautifully. But I think people shouldn't get lost in their own businesses
Yeah.
in trying to compete so much
Yeah.
that they are not being able to maybe leverage some other people. That's my partnership heads
Yeah.
coming in, my
Yeah.
strategic partnership heads coming in, because look at where we are now.
Absolutely. And I think that's telling because, like we often say, what has kept these companies for the last 20, 30 years is not going to keep them. There is competition coming. Space and aerospace have become more accessible than it's ever been. Yes, there are some really huge barriers to entry, but none of them would have seen Elon Musk coming. 10, 15 years ago, they probably would have just written him off.
NASA wouldn't have,
You
for
know,
sure.
in the trenches. It's a blockbuster and Netflix type
Yeah,
situation. And that's
yeah.
what I see happening in aerospace. You know, no one can come. There's no other competitors. We've got a monopoly. I was watching on Diary of a CEO the whole story about how when Netflix was potentially going to sell to Blockbuster,
Blockbuster,
and
yeah.
you know they completely missed. Like they thought that they just did it. This is a multi-billion-pound company, you know, and then you have Netflix coming along, and what we don't, and no, they just didn't anticipate it. They were so in their own lane that they just didn't have the vision and the visibility. And so what we're saying now is just we don't want that to happen to you. We just don't want that to happen to you. But it's quite possible when we look at the industry objectively, when we look at what's happening, when we look at the level of innovation, when we look at robotics, when we look at AI, when we look at automation, like literally no one is safe. So
No.
let's just do some due diligence. Let's get ahead of the race.
Yeah.
And it's a phenomenal industry, but we need to close up some holes.
We do, and the stories continue. And I know, and very quickly, you mentioned automation. I did think it was kind of interesting that
Yeah.
actually and I'm sure it's out there, and we learn every day. The capsule could get brought back home by remote control,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Computer operated remote control.
Wow.
So then that begs, I know they went up there to do stuff, but then are we literally accelerating in the area of literally manned aircraft, unmanned aircraft
Yeah, absolutely.
and stuff
Absolutely.
to avoid it?
Absolutely.
And without that, we've seen it in drones, we've seen it.
Yeah.
It's there, it's out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the notion of this level of excursion, do we have to think about that? And then the other bit is, we talked about skills as well, and this is a thing about how important trying to get your ducks in a row is. There are the Crew Dragon was going to go up with 4 crew members from SpaceX. They agreed to only go up with 2 to leave 2 seats free to come back down. Great, fabulous, lovely. But that's 2. I did think about it. I thought, what if I was the third and the fourth crew member who was going to go up on my mission, and now I'm not going to go up anymore? That's 2 crew members who didn't get that part of that experience, 2 crew members that they're going to have to make up. Again, this is nobody's fault. This is anything, but it's this whole knock-on and domino effect of, I don't know what's happened. This, we're using as a very loose example of things that we talked about, but the consequences continue.
Absolutely. But one thing is for sure, it's an incredible and exciting space. And one of the reasons we do this, to an audience that isn't in aerospace or space, is because like we think that the wider community, the wider business community needs to fully have more visibility of how incredible this sector is and the huge breadth of opportunities that are in here in this sector, because there are some wild and crazy things happening that are now becoming normal, which when we were children, it was just literally things that we read about in books. And now here we are. And so the age that these aerospace companies were born in is a very different time and space to where we find ourselves today and where the world is today. And so, yeah, cheers to the future. It is very, very, very bright, but it's going to take strategy and some planning to fully realize and capitalize on the opportunities that exist. And our business exists to help aerospace companies do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So that was
Yes.
my little news
I
bulletin.
love that. And listen, I am excited for next time. This is like officially your segment for me. Like I love that. Like no, 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 no. I'm not even going to ask you what the story is beforehand because I just want to be here in the moment, hearing, the next wild and wonderful news story that you bring to us. I absolutely love it. But no,
Well, as you
always.
know, I'm continuing wanting to dig in on the tech and the mechanics of it as well. I saw a great diagram of one of these capsules too, and I've already promised to try and virtually from a distance interfere in the space station and stuff. So lots going on there. It's been a pleasure as always.
As always, love doing these lives with you. So we'll be back next month. The day will be out soon. Once again, this is Aerospace Chronicles with Bumi Durowoju and myself, Katrina Douglas. And we'll be coming to you once a month to share our latest musings and learnings and gleanings and insights on the aerospace sector. So for those of you that have joined live, thank you for joining us. Those of you that will be catching the replay, again, thank you for watching. And we will see you again next month. As always, if you have any questions, anything resonated with you, connect with either myself or Bumi here on LinkedIn. Drop us a comment. We always come back to look at the comments and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Yes. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.